I apologize, Charles, I didn't prepare any music for us today.
Okay.
We'll be on in just a moment here. Just waiting for all the streams to start.
Oh.
All right, and we are just about there. All right, Charles, welcome to Wednesday, where, of course, Charles Ortel is closing in. How are you, Charles?
I'm doing just fine, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's lovely to see you, as always. Remote today. Everybody saw me in Washington, D.C. the other day, visiting Imran's attorney slash employer. So I apologize I can't be with you there in New York, but I think this is a close second to be able to be live with you here. And of course, we're going to be talking today quite a bit about what at one time may have seemed like an odd couple, and that, of course, are new friends Kim Jong-un and President Donald Trump.
The Golden Duo.
The Golden Duo. I was really impressed and pleased with the results of that historic summit. A lot of people on the what you and I might consider fake news were sort of complaining, saying that this document that they signed didn't really contain any hard details of how they would de-nuke North Korea. But I feel like that's a little bit of an unrealistic expectation after their very first meeting. I think the fact that they're talking and shaking hands and agreeing to move forward is much better than what we've seen in all previous administrations, which have seemed like saber rattling and rhetoric.
I agree, and I think it's really a very sad set of moments for the Democrats, many in the Democratic Party, because history in the end will mark November 2016 as perhaps the beginning of the end for the traditional Democratic Party. I mean, you have a lot of evidence out there that historians will review, people who care about this stuff will review, and it'll be easy, and we'll talk about this in the slides, it'll be easy to contrast the lapdog corporate media's reaction to President Obama during his 8 years, feckless, ineffective, damaging 8 years, where, the media even today, the corporate media, it will let the Obama people get away with the notion that it was a scandal-free 8 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you contrast that and real wrongdoing that did occur and will be exposed with what Donald Trump is doing now. Now, Donald Trump is working for free and was very wealthy before he went into the White House. Barack Obama did not work for free and is only very wealthy now that he's exited the White House.
Yeah.
And I think, what we're really looking at here in terms of the rhetoric coming out of the Democratic Party, which really, for its comments while Donald Trump was outside this country, they were so disgraceful. It used to be that politics ended at the water's edge. Here you have a president flying around the world doing tough work in many places, and everything he says is immediately challenged by people who don't really know actually now what is truly going on, and who pound their chests. And if their politicians are doing this to try to coax more dollars out of the billionaire class that is happy to continue this uniparty debate.
Yeah, I was very pleased with the result. I felt quite proud of Donald Trump. I think he did a good job. Everybody who was saying, he's not presidential or this kind of stuff, I thought he did a very good job. I mean, we've heard, of course, Charles, that they say that even meeting with Kim and shaking his hand is on some diplomatic level, giving Kim what he wants. But how can you negotiate anything if they're not willing to meet with the guy and show him the respect of, being a world leader?
Well, I'm reminded of an experience I had when I was trying to rescue a company that was had either gone bankrupt or was headed towards bankruptcy. And I successfully got the management team to leave the United States and fly all the way to Saudi Arabia to meet with that dishonorable prince, Prince Walid.
Right.
And we were the team was making a management presentation about how they were going to improve things in the future, and they insisted on having this pompous, I think he was a PhD guy, stand up and explain, the future and the plans that he saw. And the prince took me aside and said, "I need to speak to you in the other room." And he looked at me and said, "Charles, is this the same idiot who managed to get to plan the business so well that it's now in financial distress?" And similarly, these pundits, it's one accurate thing actually that Prince Walid did say that I know of, but the punditry class and the establishment wings of both parties, I would argue, have screwed up the United States position so badly since 1988. They've enriched the donor class, they've enriched donors, they've prolonged, their operation over levers of power. They are the last people, these supposed establishment types in both parties, that we should be listening to now about anything, whether it's foreign policy, domestic policy, what we like at Hollywood, you name it. These people are idiots, proven idiots. And Donald Trump is doing the world a favor, disrupting the lock that establishment elites have on large economies and that corrupt people have on the smaller economies. So he's fighting against major league odds, and we can't forget that the corporate media is part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge part of the problem. And in fact, I believe Trump said that fake news is the biggest enemy of the people of the United States, and I certainly agree with that. What did you think, Charles, about Dennis Rodman's role or participation in this whole North Korea summit that took place in Singapore?
Well, I think that Dennis Rodman is, first of all, he was a gifted basketball player. I mean, not just an ordinary basketball player, but an extraordinary basketball player. And to function at the level he functioned for as long as he functioned, you have to have some marvelous qualities to you. Now, he's certainly a bit of an odd duck. I mean, putting on a combination Make America Great hat, and as you pointed out, this potcoin.com shirt. You want to talk about it as far away from the establishment, here's kind of where you may be. But I think Dennis Rodman and many others who have functioned at a high level in whether it's sport or music and the arts believe that a way through the hostility and the rivalries that politicians and others like to foster is encouraging this type of competition. And I think in a heartfelt way, Dennis Rodman definitely believes that through his sports ambassadorship, his basketball ambassadorship, he found a way to make a connection to the leader of North Korea. And I found it very interesting. It was obviously an emotional interview he gave to CNN, but which is fine. I think it's great, actually, that it was emotional. But one thing that really stood out to me is that Dennis Rodman, when he took his concerns to President Obama, the Obama administration, they just wouldn't even listen to him, and he was very frustrated by that. And so this whole narrative, I think, is manufactured by elites that Republicans are racist, the Democrats feel for minority people, and Obama had the best interests of minorities and the downtrodden at heart is rubbish.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who seem to have benefited during Obama's tenure, and frankly during Bush and Clinton's tenure, are the donors to the campaigns. Neither party really cares very much, it would seem, about working people. And it's really Donald Trump, a rare individual who, I think for him, party is less important than country. And he watched this mess under Bush. He was very critical of the Iraq War, for example. He watched this mess. He was free to criticize Republicans, free to criticize Democrats, free to criticize apathetic people. But at heart, he has children, many children, and now grandchildren, and he cares deeply about the country where his family has made its fortune. And, I think he deserves deference and respect for having worked as hard as he has worked in 501 or whatever it is days now. He's really producing results. It's his reforms. Obama did not set the table for the Trump recovery and for the improvements in international relations that Donald Trump, that neophyte with no experience, has managed, I'm saying that jokingly, of course, has managed to accomplish. I mean, he is looking around the world and saying, I am the leader of the free world. I'm going to try to fix the problems that might be fixed. I'm going to use the enormous leverage that the United States does have to fix problems, and I'm going to get to work making America and the world great again. I think it's, this is a major figure in world history.
Yeah. Charles, I realize that I say this potentially to your chagrin, but I did vote for Barack Obama twice, and I was very disappointed.
That's it. I'm done.
Show's over. Well, but the point is, I was sold by this change idea, and I felt it was time for America to live up to its motto that all men are created equal, and that an African-American president, someone intelligent like Barack Obama, could be of great benefit. I was totally disappointed in Obama, and one thing in particular that I found shocking was there was so much reporting about the violence against black males in particular by law enforcement, and I felt that Barack Obama didn't really do anything, in my view, anything effective. And we talk about Dennis Rodman, and of course he's a little bit off the wall, but someone like Dennis Rodman, I feel, can be a very important figure for someone like Barack Obama or Donald Trump to reach out to black youth, because I think there are a lot of teenagers potentially who might identify a lot more with someone like Dennis Rodman than they would someone like Barack Obama or certainly Donald Trump. And using sports stars and actors and music stars and things like that for a positive effect to bring people together and have a conversation, I think is something that Barack Obama missed out on, and I really was pleased. I've been saying for a long time, I'd like to see Dennis Rodman become the U.S. ambassador to North Korea, and although most people think that's crazy and absurd, I think single-handedly Dennis Rodman did a lot more for United States diplomacy in North Korea than so many of his professional diplomatic predecessors. And just to touch on this Potcoin issue for a moment, I don't know much at all about Potcoin. I cannot endorse it. I don't know who has created it, but in my cursory examination of just what it is, I found it kind of interesting. It's a cryptocurrency that's designed to be used for legalized marijuana sales. Of course, we know California, Colorado, Washington, D.C., a number of states have legalized cannabis, but because it remains illegal at a federal level, FDIC-insured banks cannot process credit card transactions. So what this does is it creates a situation where the owners of legal businesses that are selling marijuana, either medical or recreational, have to have a lot of cash on hand because all the transactions are done in cash, and it makes them targets for violent crime. These stores frequently have armed guards outside them, and it remains a sort of a dangerous business both for the business operators and the people that would go in there. So perhaps Dennis Rodman is, by using this cryptocurrency, people can do these legal transactions without having to have something physical in the store that can be stolen other than marijuana. So perhaps Dennis Rodman knows some things, and I was very pleased to see the progress in North Korea.
Well, on Potcoin, now you've cleared something up for me. All along, I thought that was all about some Bitcoin equivalent for the kitchen.
Buying cookware, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But at least it's a cryptocurrency that has a specific purpose that makes sense, rather than something like Steemit, which just appears to be a Ponzi scheme.
Agreed. Well, I know we're pressed for time, so maybe we should jump into the old slides.
Absolutely. Here we go.
Is the graphic already been up?
The graphic has been up several times, and I do like to bring the graphic back periodically throughout each broadcast. Okay. That way, when people, after the initial live stream, come back to watch it again, if they're cycling through it, they can know which particular episode they're looking at. And of course, today we're highlighting how President Trump and Kim Jong-un are, in fact, the odd couple.
Well, I just bring it up to compliment the art department once again. I think it really is a phenomenal graphic and worthy of perhaps, I don't know what, certainly a T-shirt, maybe a bedspread. I don't know.
I've got to get
Maybe
back
a
on the
cup holder.
T-shirt store. There's a couple of graphics. People have been requesting the Imran Awan working the phones graphic on a mug.
That's good. That's good. So today, you're absolutely right. What we're going to talk about is this odd pairing of Donald Trump, who some argue is an aspiring tyrant, but he's very much an outsider, and Kim Jong-un, the grandson of and son of dictators, and himself a dictator in North Korea. It's very interesting to note that during the Obama years, he was congratulated for going and having this endless non-deal with Iran that we will talk about in a bit, and then for opening up relations with Cuba. He was hailed for all of that. What did we get out of the Cuba deal? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And the Iran deal isn't even technically a deal.
Just gave him money.
Right. So to watch and look, to see the press react to what Donald Trump has done here, it reveals to me once again Donald Trump is playing 8-dimensional chess, and the press is playing how do I work off this hangover by the 6 p.m. slot when I have to go on television. I mean, they're really missing that Donald Trump is in a campaign here not only to solve problems in North Korea, in bilateral problems, but also to take on these corrupt multilateral bureaucracies that are soaking taxpayer money and really holding economies back rather than letting them go forward with a whole bunch of unelected elites. So he took on the G7 and this North Korea mess and sent signals to other rogue and potentially rogue regimes of Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Bolivia, you name it, Nicaragua. This was a masterclass performance, and I was particularly impressed. I loved it when they tried to argue he's not prepared, he hasn't done enough work.
Right.
And so then he flies over there and does everything, and then decides, you know what, I'll give an unscripted press conference where I'll answer questions for like an hour and 10 minutes. I happened to be up at that time of day, 4 o'clock New York time in the morning. And I was able to watch the whole thing. I thought it would be 15 minutes. And here's a man who will turn 72 years old tomorrow.
Amazing
flying back. Well, it's just, I think it would be very difficult. I mean, we put Donald Trump up, who is not a self-professed expert on detail, right? Mm-hmm. Put that performance against that idiot professor from MIT, Professor Gruber, mm-hmm. who supposedly was an expert on Obamacare and healthcare and was being paid millions of dollars.
Can I show that, Charles, before we get off the G7?
We'll be on the G7 next page.
Okay.
So you can show that.
We'll show that.
Yeah. So we're talking today in separate places, but it's really a very important day because whether it's in the next few minutes or hours, sometime tomorrow, certainly by 3 p.m., the world is finally going to learn what Inspector General Horowitz has been up to, lo these many days with all his staff. And I don't know whether the report's going to be 400 or 500 pages, but as we said in the past, you don't write a long report to describe fantastically wonderful performance, right? I mean, this is a long report because there's serious problems, and we're going to find out about them within 24 hours or so.
This is certainly one of the most eagerly awaited reports. Oh, whoops, I think I just revealed our funny graphic, but that's okay. One of the most eagerly awaited reports about anything in a long time, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, in the same week where Donald Trump is disrupting the traditional relationships with North Korea. And, one of our important viewers sent me a private message reminding that the situation in South Korea is extremely complicated. I mean, it was only recently that the previous leader of South Korea was kicked out in a horrible economic scandal, which may or may not be tied to the Clintons and the deep state. And so the question of whether actors in the deep state have been fomenting hostilities between South and North to continue making the arguments, for needing this vast military establishment that we have,
Right.
is something that we need to be thinking about here. I mean, Donald Trump is not simply seizing on problems that involve foreign actors. He's also taking on the thing that outgoing President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned everybody about back in 1961, the military-industrial complex, which
Right.
remains ever more potent and in some ways dangerous than it was in 1961. It's even more dangerous today in 2018. So this is going to be a very momentous week. And
Just
I'm
real
sure
quickly,
Donald.
Charles, on that Eisenhower comment, I think something that President Eisenhower could have never predicted was the theater of war that is now cyber warfare. I don't think that President Eisenhower could have even predicted the computer, the personal computer, or the smartphone, which is essentially a supercomputer in everyone's pocket. And so this battlefield, this theater of war permeates our everyday lives.
Right, and indeed, what I think has been set up here is we have a battle between the discredited and corrupt globalists, who have been, in many ways, monetizing personal data through places like Facebook and Google and Twitter and, frankly, even Skype and Microsoft and other ways. And who love this system of unregulated globalism where they can never be caught out for their crimes. There's no international court with any teeth. The national systems have in the past until recently been in thrall of these corrupt globalists. And now what we see is a rising, growing strong, frankly, of nationalists, not just in the United States, but in many, many countries. Our system is not ready for a global system of governance. What we are ready for is many, many nations, or more than 200 nations, with each nation trying to sell to the world the great strengths that they offer to the world, and to trade with the world, and to make their own people, to look after their own people. We are not ready for some exalted poobah to fly around the world and figure out the problem, fix the problems in every single nation. We just don't have enough commonality, frankly, among peoples, and the distribution of assets and liabilities is so skewed that it would never make sense, for example, for the United States to subjugate itself to a global leader. We're not going to do that.
Right.
So this is a momentous period, and with that, I wonder if we should just jump into the second slide.
Yep.
We'll rip through the second slide quickly. Our viewers have come to see this, but when we see the degree to which governments, say in the UK with Tommy Robinson, and now we'll talk about Germany in a bit, when we see the way that foreign governments other than the US, and maybe even including the US, try to muzzle free expression of thought, that's when you should remember how special America is and why Thomas Jefferson, who people like to make fun of now on the elite campuses, Thomas Jefferson, as I've said before on prior broadcasts, he had been governor of Virginia, he had been vice president and president of the United States, he had been the first, basically, foreign minister of the United States, and on his tombstone he asked for only three things to be put down: that he was the author of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, that he was the author of the Declaration of Independence, and that he was the founder of the University of Virginia. I mean, that's a special human being would say, that's all I really care about. These other political jobs, they really don't matter too much. And when you think about freedom of expression, that is a very, very important right. And we are able to do this, Jason, from America because of Thomas Jefferson's sacrifice, and those are the other founders. And without this freedom of expression, you end up in closed societies like a North Korea, like a China, like other countries, where the people who are sitting there, the very insightful, let's call them the Dennis Rodmans, and also the Albert Einsteins, the unconventional thinkers who see life differently and may be able to improve the lot of hundreds of millions, billions of lives by sharing their unique perspectives. Those other societies close off the kind of discourse that is so important and essential, and that I hope we will promote when we get done with the Clinton Foundation, attacking the current status quo at these elite universities that are harboring political correctness and not fomenting the kind of dialogue that we are trying to instigate. So this disclaimer is an important one. We come to you, viewers, from the United States of America, where we can speak our mind, we can share our views. We're providing links to key documents so you can see for yourself what we're talking about. We encourage your thoughts, your comments. I'm starting to get more and more every day, and for those, I'm grateful. Please keep your comments short. If you have supporting arguments, make them after the first paragraph, but don't send very, very lengthy comments. If you want to reach us, we've got the contact links up on the screen there, my website and my Twitter and your Twitter, Jason.
Yep.
And then we have...
Sorry, there. I'm going to bring that back. I just wanted to add, Charles, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to add, while you're on the freedom of speech topic, that, of course, we've been discussing many times, you've brought up your dislike for the private intelligence firms that we're hearing about all around the world, whether that's Fusion GPS or Black Cube or any of these others. I'm finding that there is a sort of backdoor route to trying to suppress free speech in the United States. And I don't want to use up too much time, but I do want to talk about this because Crowdsource the Truth has been a target of this in a variety of different ways. Now, a lot of people are watching us right now on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, which is the original Crowdsource the Truth. But the live streams, of course, have been forced to go out on the 21st Century 3D YouTube channel, which is from my previous venture, my 3D stereoscopic production company. Now, this happened because of malicious strikes from, people who are classified as trolls, but I actually believe are a coordinated group that are working to silence us, and they do a variety of things, including striking the channels. Next week, we'll be back on our regular Crowdsource the Truth channel, but in order to keep Crowdsource the Truth going, it's important that we have the financial support of the community, because the channel is not monetized on YouTube or any other platform. People need to support the channel if they want it to stay around by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, or making a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsource the truth. But Charles, as a bit of an experiment, because so far the financial support for the channel, although has been provided by a number of very generous sponsors, there's still a very serious shortfall month to month in terms of my living expenses, and people have seen me travel to Washington, D.C. and New Zealand and Los Angeles and various places. It gets very expensive. So as an experiment, I tried to enable monetization on the 21st Century 3D channel, because some people would like to use Super Chat or things like that. And you can see here that it's not enabled yet, because the application is in review. And when you click on this Learn More link, YouTube tells you that you need to have an AdSense count and all this stuff is there. And within about a week, they say they'll give you an answer as to whether or not you're allowed to monetize your channel. And it's been more than 2 weeks, and I've heard nothing from YouTube. So we've seen a number of very sort of insidious ways of suppressing the progress of Crowdsource the Truth. And I'm sorry for that lengthy interlude, but I wanted to really bring that to people's attention, because if you're enjoying Crowdsource the Truth, if you like the information that we're bringing to you, it's very important that you sponsor the channel.
Great, I agree. So what I thought we might do quickly, Jason, if we could pull up the playlist.
Oh, of course.
Which now is very extensive.
And also dovetails off of exactly what I was saying, because in order to counteract the efforts by those that would suppress the information that we are trying to bring forward, we've created this Sunday with Charles playlist. So all of the, how many videos have we got now, Charles? 81. This is the 82nd video we're doing right now. The prosecutors and investigators and curious individuals around the world who want a central repository for all of the incredible information that Charles has brought forward. You can see it right here in this Sunday with Charles playlist on YouTube.
And thank you for that. It's very useful. And we probably need to do a show maybe in early July just summarizing the metrics, because there's really a phenomenal amount of information here in terms of how many people have watched, how long they've watched, where they hail from. These are long videos, and thank you viewers for being patient, but we're trying to expose the largest set of frauds ever attempted in the world. So you think if you're going to do that, you're going to make that allegation, you better flesh it out in detail, and that's what we've been doing. And those are just new to the channel. Just start at the beginning and work your way through, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll end up, actually, if you're a serious investigator in a major government that has made contributions to the Clinton Foundation and its allied charities, and you want to get your money back, you'll begin to see the magnitude. You should see the magnitude of the fraud. And if you reach out to me and to Jason, as a number of people have, you'll figure out how it is possible to get your money back.
Yeah, and you can reach Charles via Twitter. He is at Charles Ortel. Everybody should be following Charles. You can also get him on charlesortel.com, and these are both great resources for people who want more information about Charles's research. And Charles, there is a link to your email address on charlesortel.com, right? There it is.
Yeah, it says contact. It doesn't give the address out, but I think at the top somewhere it says contact, maybe on the top bar. And you can, through the site, you can contact me, and it goes to my email, and then I read the email and decide if I want to respond. I tend to respond to most emails, but when I get a jerk, you get blocked.
There are a number of them out there, Charles. It's a problem we all face, of course. But thank you for all that, and back to your presentation, which will, of course, be available in the description for download after we're done with the live stream.
Great, and so in the interest of time, I'm not going to suggest that we pull up all the links. I'll go, but I do want to take some of them. This G7, initially when I heard about G7 and then G20 and then these different multilaterals, at a certain point I asked myself, what the heck do we need all these things for? I mean, it's not as if we have an ambassador and a consulate and a lot of people in in just about every single country that matters around the world. Why should we then create yet another way to interact with people through this G7 and then the G20 and then the UN and the Security Council? There's just so many overlapping sets of responsibilities. And I think when those of us, Jason, you and I have a lot of experience in the private sector, and when I think back the degree to which bureaucracies have been pared down, inefficiencies have been cut out of the private sector in the last 30 years, and then contrast that with this multiplicity of organizations that, of course, have to fly their leaders around in expensive, private, gigantic jets, and of course they have to have Major League hospitality, nice hotel suites, and all that other stuff. Donald Trump, I think, is looking at this and saying, I don't need this crap. This is not helping anybody in the United States. This is just helping the people who like to attend summits. And maybe we should have fewer summits, and we'd have a lot more success in solving problems. Right. So, group summits. So I actually think so far Donald Trump has done very well. And if I were somebody who was thinking that they're going to have a long career here in New York City, working at the UN, I would not be so quick to make that assumption. To me, I think the days of the United States, at least under Donald Trump, the days of the United States shouldering a disproportionately high percentage of the cost of these ridiculous, ineffective, in some cases harmful world organizations like the World Health Organization, those days are over. And I think you're going to see more and more heat come on these organizations, and more demands from Donald Trump and others to justify the existence of these very expensive multilateral organizations. So I think Donald Trump began his trip out to North Korea with the stop in Quebec, actually doing extremely well.
Yeah. And perhaps when they eliminate the G7, some of that G7 budget can go towards the fake eyebrows.
Exactly. It's interesting how we picked that up on Sunday, and it's interesting how many in the corporate media actually picked up on making a big deal about it. It's pretty funny.
It's got legs.
It does. It got brows.
It's got brows.
But yeah, and you're right. You mentioned Donald Trump. Just actually, as we were putting these slides together, I picked up on the fact that he said it's on Drudge that the number one enemy of the United States is fake news, which is this is a Drudge top of the page link. And there's I have to say I agree with him. When I think about my interactions with people across the corporate media, and now I've been doing this for over 10 years. So I know a lot of these people around the world. I am mindful of the fact that there's a huge disconnect between underlying reality and what these filtered corporate media types who have to care about advertising dollars and relationships with big companies that typically are their major advertisers, how they cover the news. And we now are in this very dangerous position, frankly, where a high percentage of people who even follow news get them through Facebook and Google, where there's strong bias against the conservative economic policies, and strong bias against Donald Trump, and enormous power concentrated in the owners, the multi-billionaires of Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. So I think Donald Trump is right to point this out, but I really wish he would go further in encouraging Congress to hold hearings about the potential anti-competitive nature of these internet giants, these tech giants. I mean, on a day today when AT&T is one authority to acquire Time Warner, I think we would be correct to ask ourselves, how comfortable are we that the people at Google, the people to pick on Facebook and Twitter, how comfortable are we that those people are going to be effective and neutral stewards of the valuable information that we provide for free into social media and into our search results? So, I see you have up this thing about Norway. At the same time where Donald Trump is being criticized by everybody in the G6, other than with the exception of Italy, and to a lesser extent possibly Japan. Now we learn that a country that will never be in any of these big organizations because it's too small, Norway, wants us to send more troops to defend them.
Against
and
Russia.
Norway has been against Russia. Yeah, I mean Norway has been. First of all, their economy is hardly a green economy. Their economy is, basically monetizing their stores of fossil fuels and to a lesser extent geothermal energy. So it's a very rich country, if not one of the richest in the world. They are all in for globalism. They are major league, continuing, unrepentant benefactors to the corrupt Clinton Foundation. And they have some nerve suggesting to the United States that we ought to, do more to defend them until they fess up to their role in promoting unregulated, corrupt globalism around the world. Now, this is Norway is, I think, in the eye of the spear here, and so it's interesting that they would feel they're in a position where they could, they're not really making demands, but in treaties, let's say, to the United States, they want our money and they want our military support, but they want to do everything they can to undermine this president. That'll be a fun discussion. Won't be any eyebrows left for that leader.
Right.
And so, the next link that we have up there is a hilarious article, it's an internet blog post comparing the fawning media under Obama, their treatment of this Iran rape, I would argue, and pillage of the United States, with what Trump has tried to accomplish on Korea. And I love, the idea that to this day, John Kerry is probably right now manning the phones, the bat phones, trying to make sure that he keeps his Iran deal resurrected one way or another through the intercession of his pals in France and elsewhere across Europe. But you look at what Donald Trump has done. He didn't even sign an MOU with Kim, but he signed something with Kim, and he's pledged to make any arrangement that happens with North Korea an actual treaty. In contrast, even today, We, the public, do not know the full details of whatever deal Donald Trump and that idiot John Kerry signed.
No,
with
Barack Obama.
I'm sorry, Barack Obama and that idiot Kerry signed with Iran. We just don't know that any of the crucial details. What we do know is that when after Donald Trump tore up the deal, Iran threatened various leaders in Europe to say, if you don't support this deal, we're going to expose how much money we paid you. And I think this is something that the world really needs to understand, just how corrupt European and other leaders may have been in reaching this ridiculous arrangement, which thankfully Donald Trump has put through the shredder with Iran.
Yeah.
Now, the next link down for that, of course, the Iranian, I think, foreign ministry spokesman thought he was being very clever, making the argument, well, you got to understand one thing, North Korea. Donald Trump is the kind of guy who will tear up any deal that he makes, missing the fact that Donald Trump did not make the Iran deal, and Barack Obama did not, as smart as he thinks he is, he didn't ever check the work to understand that treaties do survive because they're confirmed by Congress. But, one-off deals done by a president without any scrutiny do not necessarily survive. So if Barack Obama had been confident that the Iran deal, John Kerry, that it truly had been a win-win, it would have been confirmed as a treaty. But instead, he knew that it was a disaster. It would never get through the Senate. So they tried this side deal with Iran. Barack Obama did, that is, and Donald Trump rightly, and we don't have to worry about Iranian law, even if there is any, under U.S. law, what Donald Trump did was absolutely lawful, while what Barack Obama did, I don't think was lawful. And that's why Donald Trump tore it up. And now there's going to be a reckoning just exactly what and who crafted this so-called deal with Iran. So I think what's going on here is a lot of people around the world. It's one thing to talk about what you might do. I would do this, I would have done that. But we're watching a real leader step into some big-ass shoes and take out a large bat and go around the world. On the one hand, here's my bat, and I know how to use it. And on the other hand, have I mentioned that I'm extremely rich and my country's very powerful? And if you get on the right side, and come back to earth, the United States can be your best friend. After all, we were at war with Germany twice. We were at war with Japan once. And we are, perhaps our closest, in theory, large economy allies are Germany and Japan. And may I remind you, Mr. North Korea leader and Mr. Leader in Iran, that we flattened Germany. We flattened Japan. And after we got done winning the war, in the case of World War II, with exceptional assistance from Russia, then the Soviet Union, we opened up our checkbooks, having lost a lot of blood in both wars. We opened up our checkbook and we rebuilt. We created the conditions wherein Angela Merkel, who grew up, by the way, in East Germany, not in West Germany, and Mr. Abe and others in Japan, we created the conditions. Our ancestors created the conditions that made it possible for Germany and Japan to be the powerhouses they are today. Of course, helped by the many able people in both those respective countries. If we can do that, after World War II, think of what we could accomplish if we changed the direction, changed the trajectory of North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, and other trouble spots. And we're not in a shooting war with Russia, but the same set of principles applies. We are a powerful force. We are a gigantic economy. If you want, as we talked about last Sunday, if you're in business and you want to be a global business, you have to be president of the United States of America. And if you trade with Iran, you're not going to do business in the United States of America. Good luck with that approach.
Now, Charles, has there ever been a more historic photograph? You talk about photos telling 1,000 words. This one is it, I would say, wouldn't you?
No photo expert, but it's certainly a good one. It's certainly a great photo. And so another thing to point out here, if we go to all right, so yeah, that's the Iran thing. That's that people in Iran, one must remember, Iran was run as a secular government under the Shah for decades. Now, nothing's perfect about any government, right? All humans, each human has faults, and you put groups of humans together, you're going to get lots of faults. But it's worthwhile noting that Iran has an ancient history and a long and deep and vibrant culture that has been locked down under these thugs, the mullahs. And if the people of Iran understood just how corrupt Iran is under these supposed religious figures, how much money they're skimming off of every export sale of their natural resources and other things, I think the people of Iran would rise up and get rid of the mullahs. Now,
Charles,
the United States.
I wonder if our viewers are aware that Iran has female morality police. I certainly didn't know that before right now.
Yeah, the mind numbs, right?
Yeah.
But so I think the situation in Iran. I wrote when I was writing for the Washington Times. I wrote a piece about Neda, that young lady who, in the 2009 protest period, was so viciously, no good way to be assassinated, but so violently killed. And that was at a moment where Barack Obama, was very quick to intervene and make his preferences known as president with respect to the Israeli elections, the Kenyan elections, you name it. He was happy to talk about Brexit and this and that. But one thing he didn't stand up for is the people of Iran in 2009. I think Donald Trump is quite prepared to do that. I think Donald Trump and people in his administration are quite prepared to accept the outcome of a legitimate election that removes the mullahs from power. And I think, the people of Iran, I hope, are watching very carefully and are encouraged by what they see in Donald Trump. Now then, one thing that's really amazing when we think about the recent adventure in Korea, please remember that Donald Trump and Rex Tillerson and now Mike Pompeo made the call that they were not going to fill all these positions in the State Department. They're going to keep a lean and mean approach. And, I think it's very nice that Sarah Huckabee Sanders reached out to Dennis Rodman. I think it must be very difficult to do the work that she and Donald Trump and others do in the White House. There's so many people feel they have a right to speak to the president and weigh in on this and that. And I think it was very elegant, frankly, of Sarah Huckabee Sanders to reach out to Rodman in the way that she did.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that, so it's a nice thing.
Yeah. So then there's a story about China there that I would like to bring up if possible.
Sure.
And this, I haven't verified this yet, but Gateway Pundit is pretty reliable. And
although they misspelled huge, left out the Y.
Yeah, true. That's true. So here, the thing that's interesting is China's been chattering up a storm, and as we observed last Sunday, China's economy, I think, is actually in serious trouble right now, because the dollar is strong. The condition of our economy is improving, and as the dollar strengthens, as interest rates in the U.S. rise, that creates difficulties for borrowers that are not of the same credit standing, which is most borrowers, as the United States. And so, particularly in the emerging markets, where local interest rates are high, moves of the kind we've seen in interest rates in the U.S. and the strengthening of the dollar do make it very difficult in India and even in China. So when you look, again, China has made enormous progress since 1988 in economic terms, but still today, China is an afterthought when it comes to trying to reach consumers. The bulk of the world's consumers who have money and credit are not in China. They're in the United States, they're in these G7 countries, across Europe, Canada, elsewhere. The people buying goods and services for cash, other than basic stuff, are concentrated outside of China. And China, meanwhile, has built up this vast productive base and vast array of residential buildings and other things in cities And I wouldn't be so quick to assume that China is immune from the type of disaster that we had in 2007, 8, and 9. So it's good to see that they stood down on these islands, if that's true. And then, I don't know if you know this, Jason, but Norway has apparently nominated Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, you would think that might give him a leg up because it's awarded in Oslo.
Well, I guess Robert David Steele will be disappointed because he won't win it this year if Donald Trump is getting it.
But I think that's going to be. I mean, the late night comics are going to have a lot of material on this one.
Why? That seems like a good thing to nominate him for.
Right, I understand, but in Barack Obama's case, he was nominated for work in advance of the work that he was going to do. He hadn't even been president for like a number of days before he was nominated, and then he wins it. For having done basically nothing.
Do you think Trump will win?
I don't know. I mean, the animus against Trump is very strong. Our friends in Norway tell us that, almost everybody in Scandinavia who, quote, is smart is against Trump and against conservative Republicans. So
I just don't understand how people could be against this summit. They're talking. That's the step in the right direction. I mean, I guess it's maybe not worthy of a Nobel Prize until it becomes a treaty, but it certainly seems to me like the right thing to do and a step in the right direction.
I think that's true as well. And then, that's the fun part. On the other side, the negative side, Germany, according to The Guardian, England's Guardian newspaper, is experimenting, is thinking that it might make sense to tamp down on these populists who they argue are right-wing reactionaries. That's what Europe likes to do to get you to shut up. Say, well, you're a right-wing reactionary. You can't be allowed to talk. And this is not going to work for Germany. I think it's interesting to see that that Italy and now Austria are beginning to see, and Hungary, of course, has seen for a while, the dangers of allowing massive numbers of men without their wives, who may not be married, who don't have children, to come into these countries without being vetted properly, knowing full well that it is an avowed aim of radical Islam to infiltrate these countries and do what is happening in places like Sweden. We've heard from our friend Biljana, and we see evidence that Sweden is a mess. And portions of these countries that have welcomed these gigantic flows of migrants without checking out who they really were have been suffering immensely. So we're watching that carefully. And then, there's a story here that you've got up here. The numbers that Trump is putting up on the board, and again, it's now beginning to take effect because he's been around for 500 plus days. We'll see how he does in this by-election in 2018, I think he's going to strengthen his position, but each day, the contrast between, we know what's best for you, Obama, and we're going to regulate your life out of existence, and we're going to bury you if an enemy, and we're going to give these no-bid contracts to our friends. That way of doing business, in contrast to the Trump way of doing business, bringing tax rates down, lowering unemployment, in particular for women and minorities, both African American and Hispanic. I mean, this is having major league impact. The number of people on food stamps declining because they're finding work, and we'll see how this happens. I remember when the know-it-alls said, and frankly, I've met him. I'm not bragging or anything. I did not enjoy meeting Larry Summers. He's a pompous fool. I mean, he was saying that we would have to satisfy ourselves for the rest of eternity with a 2% growth rate. That's going to be pretty good, he argued. Well, I don't think that's the case at all. I think, if you subject yourselves to these unregulated globalists, you may have to accept 2%, not under Trump. So if we move to the meat of the presentation here, I'm bringing this up again because since the last time you and I, Jason, talked about John Glasgow, I've done even more work on it.
Oh, great.
And it's very important for the crowd, if you have the time, to dig in, Google, read these links. We will begin to understand, I think, a lot better why Rod Rosenstein and Bob Mueller and James Comey have been doing what they've been doing for so long. We hear from Catherine Herridge's reporting recently that Rosenstein in January threatened the oversight people who were looking to get information about, what truly happened with the FISA warrant and all that other stuff. And Rosenstein had the gall to threaten Congress. I mean, who the hell does this guy think he is? He works for the people.
It's crazy.
And I have grave doubts about him, his background, his wife's background. I don't think this man has ever been vetted properly. I also wonder why Jeff Sessions still has a job in the Trump administration. I do not get it.
Yeah.
And to see why I'm so adamant on it, you've got to go back in to this early period with the Clinton Foundation that we've talked about before, but I want to just quickly go through it and remind people what I'm talking about. Rod Rosenstein, between 2001 and 2005, was the person in the Justice Department who had responsibility for deciding which he had, I think, prosecutorial discretion to say this tax fraud we're going to prosecute, this one we're not going to. Bob Mueller was head of the FBI, top dog investigating. Comey was at first leading the prosecution, a potential prosecution of the Clinton Foundation, and then he held Rod Rosenstein's current job as Deputy Attorney General. And these bunglers, to put it charitably, could not see obvious Clinton Foundation frauds during 2001 to 2005 when this file that we're linking to up here on the screen gives you a lot of details about what people saw and missed. Key, as we've explained in the past, is that in this third dump that's up there, for the first time we learned that Hillary Clinton was a target of the original Clinton Foundation fraud investigation that began in February of 2001. So, I mean, if you want to understand why people would be nervous about the truth being exposed, you have to go back into the history to understand their potential motivations. You've got to look at this Clinton Foundation file again. You've got to look at it, members of the FBI, very carefully to see how was it edited, what was redacted, who made those redaction decisions. Let's not leap ahead as far as you've done, Jason, but if we go to
People can't see that
BK,
yet.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you do want to go to that. It's my fault. Okay. Very important. This is a Cornell University law review article. And this is a very interesting thing. It talks about, we all know about the Arthur Anderson prosecution that resulted at first in them being convicted of a felony, and of course they went out of business because it's not a very strong argument to say, I like to use a convicted felon as my auditor. That's not going to win you much business. But on May 31st, 2005, the Supreme Court threw this verdict out in a 9-0 unanimous ruling, saying that the instructions to the jury, and I don't know if Andrew Weissman himself was involved with these instructions, but they were misleading. And they gave the jury a sense that basically you could be convicted for corruptly persuading and corruptly influencing an obstruction of justice investigation, when in fact there was a higher standard than that. So this decision came down to the Supreme Court May 31st. 30 days after that, I would argue the corrupt accounting firm, the Little Rock office of BKD, Boy King Dog, issued a grossly false and misleading, in quotes, audit for 2004 and 2003. 30 days after that Supreme Court decision, perhaps secure in the knowledge that they could get away with doing this and they wouldn't be tagged for corrupt persuasion, maybe. But that audit, we're about to show it to you, but if you try to see this audit that was issued on June 30th, 2005, if you go to the Clinton Foundation website, you'll find it's not on. This audit is not on the Clinton Foundation website for 2004. Indeed, nor are the audits for 3, 2, and 1, which we've found elsewhere. But we have found, for some time, we've known about the 2004 audit, and this 2004 audit shows to me and other people who understand accounting and finance that the Clinton Foundation was cooking its books. Okay, this is what you find on the Clinton Foundation site if you go to it. But if you go to, there'll be no audit for 2004 on the site. But if you go to the next link down,
this one?
The Google Drive link, while Glasgow was CFO, that one. Here's the audit, okay? Now stop at the first page, Jason, if you would. You notice the name of the entity being audited is what, Jason?
It's William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. It's missing the.
Right, well, it's also got a comma Inc. in its name,
yes.
Which is not its real name. So this is not the proper name of the entity. If you go 2 pages after this, you'll see the letter, and that it's dated June 30th, 2005. So 30 days after the Supreme Court decision, okay? And we've been over before that the set of accounting techniques used by this BKD firm are explicitly not allowed. So this is a fake audit, right? You're not allowed to do what they did, but they did it, and of course that's why they want to hide it. So if you go to the next page, Jason,
hashtag fake audit.
Right, here's the balance sheet, right? The supposed balance sheet, and if you look from 2003 to 2004, the biggest asset is property. And you see it goes from 71.7 up to 114 and change million, okay? The amount of alleged capital expenditures that are on the books there did not happen. We know this from extensive work that we're going to reveal in coming weeks, but I can just tell you, these are fake numbers. They did not happen. They're invented numbers. And when we've talked in the past about how fraud happens with construction, but if you want to basically launder money, and you've got a crooked accounting firm, and you've got crooked, politically connected crony trustees, what you do is you just say that you spent an extra $40 million. You find a firm that is willing to say, oh yeah, you did pay us $40 million, when the Clinton Foundation in no way paid that firm $40 million. And then the crooked firm, or people in the crooked firm, and the crooked Clinton Foundation, and various people involved, split the money up. Okay? So the reason that John Glasgow, a reason that he likely went missing, is he was an honest man. We know this from other reporting. He was not going to go along with the scheme. He was not the leader of the contracting firm. He was the chief financial officer. But this Clinton Foundation was the biggest and most high prestige project of the firm where John Glasgow worked, CDI Contractors. And he would certainly, if there was a billing dispute, he would certainly have been involved in discussions between CDI and the Clinton Foundation and anybody else who had questions over what was going on here. Now, shame on Bob Mueller, and shame on James Comey, and shame on Rod Rosenstein for not digging deeply enough into the Clinton Foundation frauds, which escalated precisely at this moment when the building was finished. Now, those of you in the audience who have experience with construction, I have some experience personally and then business, but when you put up a project, once as it's coming towards the end, that's when the disputes start. That's when, the client typically is saying, no, I really don't want to pay you this extra final bill here. It's way too large. Why are you billing me for all these change orders at the very end? I never authorized. So you have a back and forth, right? This building was finished on November 18th, 2004, according to the Clinton Foundation. It got a final certificate of occupancy, according to Little Rock, who I have contacted, in October of 2005. So just this period here is very pregnant, very important period, 2004 and 5. And I can tell you categorically that on June 30th, 2005, BKD and the trustees of the Clinton Foundation cooked the books of the Clinton Foundation. They inflated the costs by tens of millions of dollars. They did not spend the amount of money they claimed they spent. And they created this fake set of books and records. And they thought they were going to pass it off and nobody would find out nobody would be the wiser. So it wasn't enough for them to do it once. They then had to do it again. In the second link that you previously had, is a link, not to that, the link to the that one, yeah. There's the 2005, in quotes, audit. Notice also that this audit is now it's addressed to the William J. Clinton Foundation, Inc. There's no such entity. There's no entity, legal entity
they
that
lost
says William
presidential.
J. Well, the presidential is fine, but it should have.
No, they took it out.
Well, they changed the name from the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation on April 28, 2005, to the William J. Clinton Foundation with no Inc.
Got it.
Okay, and for accountants, notice these things. You don't put you put the right name of the company up there.
Right.
And this isn't the right name.
Yeah.
So if we look on the next page, this body of work came together on June 9th, 2006. You see right there the date. They cooked the books again. This was a more elaborate cooking of the books. And I say that as somebody who understands how to go through financial statements. You and the FBI, your forensic accountants, if you can't see this fraud, I'd be amazed. They adjusted, they invented accounts for activity prior to December 31st, 2003. They recognized that the Clinton Foundation, you only see this if you tease it out. They try to obstruct your understanding in these documents. You have to analyze it for yourself. But when you do the kind of work that I've done, you see they admit that they were engaged in activities, most likely HIV/AIDS activities, prior to December 31st, 2003, when they had no legal authority to do that. And these activities were not small. They lie about when they took out massive $28.5 million loans. In the previous hidden audit, they admit that they took those loans out only in 2004. But in this fake audit, they claim that they took them out in 2003, which is not the case. And that allows you to launder $28.5 million by making that adjustment. So you can go on. There are a lot of technical reasons here, but the simple takeaway is that the errors that are obvious in these two documents, the missing audit that we found and the one on the Clinton Foundation website, these audits, these errors would have been noticed by John Glasgow. And if he had been asked to verify a payment that CDI had not actually received, he's the kind of person, from my recollection and reading, that he wouldn't have done this. Now here we see a story. I put this one up. This is an example in the famous and failing New York Times of how in February of this year, investigators began to look very carefully, at least the story was published in February of 2018, into construction fraud at the Palace, which is the Bloomberg headquarters building, which truly is an amazing building. But anytime you have a construction project, it's easy for fraud to occur. And the fraud typically happens by overstating costs and by getting kickbacks from the vendors to the construction project. So you get, you have a crooked construction firm with a crooked vendor, subcontractor, and the crooked contracting firm inflates the cost, the supposed cost of the project, actually spends a lot less, and then gets kickbacks from the subcontractors who cooperate in this process. This has happened, as we've said before. If you could find the books for the pyramids, you'd probably find construction fraud with the pyramids and even earlier.
So it's that common, huh, Charles?
I think so.
It's almost as if the presidential library was constructed just to create a vehicle for fraud.
Well, you have to, I mean, the accountants write treatises about risk factors, fraud risk factors. And construction is definitely an area where normally there's a lot of there are payoffs. There's all kinds of problems with construction. And there's also all kinds of problems with far-flung international operations. Does that sound familiar to you? The Clinton Foundation.
It's almost like they wrote or read the book on how to do fraud.
Yeah, so then if you go to this thing about borrowing across state lines, you get back to my favorite section of the U.S. Code, frauds and swindles and other topics like that. I mean, all of the stuff that was going on, I think, with cooking the books in 2004, 5, 6, and afterwards was going on while the Clinton Foundation, its trustees, executives, and agents were soliciting across state lines, using its contributions across state lines, using the mail, using electronic media, using phones, and in person. This is all highly illegal stuff. And so, excuse me, if a thoughtful person like John Glasgow, who understood finance, really began to dig into what he saw at the Clinton Foundation, and then also what he saw at CDI was simultaneously building a global headquarters for much less money, for like a sixth the cost, or less, an eighth the cost, for Heifer Project International on the same plot of land, 3 acres carved or 4 acres carved out of the Clinton Foundation site. CDI was building that thing, which is very nice looking, and charging a lot less. So here you have a guy who probably was asking a lot of questions, and he wouldn't shut up asking questions. And the working theory is that, these questions became inconvenient. Now, I'm not alleging here that, Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton or a member of the Clinton family had this man murdered. What I am saying is I see enough smoking guns, and I see how much money Hillary Clinton spent. She supposedly spent $30 million on her Senate campaign running against a lightweight opponent. Why did she need to raise all that money? Could it have been that her team had been looking ahead and saying, you know what, we got to get her reelected. Once she's reelected, she's a lock for president. So if you can imagine, there's a whole bunch of people who know the Clintons are bankable. They watched them work from 93 to 2001, January to January. They know how the Clintons are willing to trade money for favors, back and forth. They've seen that. Now you've got a bankable horse. You've got a bankable winner. You've got a George W. Bush who's screwed everything up, so it's unlikely a Republican's going to win. The smart money's on Hillary. And you got this pesky accountant who will not stop asking questions about the Clinton Foundation, just at the same time that Ira Magaziner's mess in Boston and internationally is coming under scrutiny of the Massachusetts state regulator, who shut that thing down in theory, or revoke its authorization to operate on March 31st, 2008. So you got a lot of incoming time bombs hitting the Clinton candidacy, and you got this pesky accountant asking questions. Is it any surprise that he might have disappeared on January 28th, 2008? Because the last thing Hillary Clinton would have needed, on top of the Magaziner mess, was credible people coming forward and saying, look, this Clinton Foundation, it's not an example that we should praise. Bill Clinton had written his book, Giving, in September of 2007, taking credit for all the supposed charitable work. Now this guy in January of 2008 is asking all these tough questions. And as a guess, somebody around the Clinton orbit said, I'll make this, this troublesome priest disappear, referencing, of course, Thomas à Becket. When that famous story is, I believe that King Henry I, when Becket was creating problems for the king, might have said, who will rid me of this troublesome priest? And then followers, murdered Becket. And something like that, it would seem to me, is a working theory that I'd like to have some serious investigators, not compromised, not connected to the Arkansas superstructure or the Uniparty superstructure. I'd like to have that fellow who's going to testify in Congress, Mr. Giacalone, people like him, the line agents, or the line agents, the good men and women in the FBI, they need to go back over this ground, because I see enough smoking guns here. There certainly is a fraud here, financial fraud, and that we would also have an unsolved death, still unsolved today, 10 years later, cries out for scrutiny.
Charles, I reached out to his brother Roger and did not hear back. They gave me his email address from his former law firm, and again, I sometimes feel like, well, I would think that the family member would want to speak to someone saying they have new evidence about the murder of their brother, but who knows what sort of situations this guy's been put through there in Arkansas, but didn't contact me back.
Well, we're going to keep pushing on it. and I've been made aware of an organization in Philadelphia that likes to tackle these unsolved cases. By the way, this isn't, this John Glasgow matter was covered in, television special format several different times. So, there is already acknowledged interest in solving this case.
Right.
So I think we might be able to get to the bottom of it, particularly if the brave men and women of the FBI go back and look at these files more carefully.
Sure.
So with that, if we go to the next and final page, because I'm watching the time as well.
Sure.
On the negative side, it's on the cover of Drudge and on various other places, there's a rumor that Michael Cohen may now, that is to say Donald Trump's personal lawyer, or one of them, may be cooperating with prosecutors, i.e. with Mueller. So they're splashing that all over the press. I don't know if that's really true. And I suspect that there's nothing, there's no real exposure for Donald Trump and his family through Michael Cohen. But that is something we need to watch. The world is not always going to go exactly the way you want. It could be that Mueller, who himself is desperate at this point.
Well, why would he drop his legal representation if he was going to make a plea deal and work as state's witness?
Well, because he had one set of lawyers to fight it, and maybe a condition of getting a plea deal is you're going to drop your defense and you're going to work with a different team. I don't know. I'd be speculating, but I just want to point out that it's not all good news for Donald Trump and those who would like to see Mueller go away. But on the other hand, we go to the second link. This absurd Russian prosecution where he has prosecuted a case, prosecuted a company that didn't legally exist at the time it supposedly committed crimes.
Right.
I mean, I suppose the Clinton Foundation didn't legally exist, doesn't legally exist, has never lawfully existed anywhere, frankly.
Well, but it hasn't been prosecuted, though.
Right. Maybe Mueller should prosecute the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
No.
Anyway, so Mueller is he's in deep trouble here because on the one hand, in one court case, this court case, the defendants have showed up and have rights, and the judge there is saying, look, you charge these people, you got to give them the evidence, have a chance to look at it, and he's now trying to limit that. It's outrageous. Then we have the case of this Andrew, I like to call him Andrew McScab. I mean, this guy is, how he got to be so high in the FBI is just beyond me. This is a despicable human being, and who has a GoFundMe account. Now he's going to sue the Justice Department?
Yeah, that was crazy. This is one of their patterns, I think, Charles. The more jeopardy they're in, the more emboldened they act. They go on book tours, they put in 6 declarations into civil lawsuits that they're not involved in, they sue the people that should be throwing them in jail. It's outrageous.
I know. But so the question, though, we've all been waiting for this Horowitz report. That's going to come out supposedly tomorrow at 3 p.m. It may leak out beforehand. And I, for one, will probably drop most everything else that I'm doing to read it very carefully, so that we can really, so I get my arms around exactly, how thorough and how credible is this Horowitz guy. If he's pulled a lot of punches here, if he gives the Clintons a pass on their email server, if he gives Hillary and the Clinton campaign passes on their false claims that the investigation was into all the behavior of all former secretaries of state, when that was not the case. If he doesn't go after the Clinton Foundation to understand, he's got to understand the rationale for why they want to keep all this stuff secret. And if he has not figured that out yet, he's pulling punches. So we will see this tomorrow, and we certainly will be talking about that this coming Father's Day on Sunday.
Right. And, that's certainly a question that we have been wanting to have answered for some time.
That's right, because we ask tough questions.
Well, it's been back and forth so many times. Is he white hat? Is he black hat? What's he up to?
Now, I'm loving this Donald Trump tweet about stiff Tim Kaine. And I'd like to encourage members of the crowdsource community to adopt the hashtag. I don't know how to create a hashtag, so I just used one. But I think we should have one for Virginia voters. It's time for the Caine Mutiny. Kaine mutiny, which of course is a reference to the Caine Mutiny with a C book.
Right.
It's time for Virginia to revolt against this idiot Tim Kaine, who truly is another Harvard Law School graduate idiot.
Now, Charles, all you need to do to create a hashtag is what you've just done. Just say, everybody tweet this hashtag, and you write hashtag Caine Mutiny and put it out there, and people start doing it. It gains momentum, and there you go. You just created a hashtag. It's almost like time phone hack.
All right. Well, maybe we'll get in the business of creating more hashtags.
There you go.
Hashtag Manufacturing Inc.
Hashtag manufacturing. I like that, Charles. Another one of your favorites.
If we put hashtag Manufacturing Blockchain Inc., we could probably take it public.
Do an ICO.
Exactly. So this is a good, thoughtful piece in American Thinker, and that's a blog that I occasionally write for, and I think I'm honored to be a part of it. It's got some excellent authors, and here's somebody commenting about. He's commenting about how Trump's really putting his mark on the primaries. And I'm also, I don't know if we can do a hashtag on this, but I think we need to call the people who follow Robert De Niro, the actor, in quotes. We can call him De Niro, not the D-E as in Emperor Nero, Dummocrats or Dumbs, the De Niro Dumbs. I mean, I happen to know the people who organize the Tony Awards, and we won't say how, Jason, you and I both know those people, but they're wonderful people. They've been doing this for a long time. And, people go to Broadway to be entertained, and they go to the Tony Awards and watch the Tony Awards to celebrate the great actors. They don't care particularly about the political opinions of people who are memorize lines for a living. They just really don't care that much about it.
Well, and I thought the timing was particularly bad, though, Charles, because it was just as the Trump-Kim summit was about to kick off. And Robert De Niro should have gone back to his, preschool teachings of if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. I mean, what was he trying to achieve with that? It was just negative.
I think there was a movie that was done on this. It's called Raging Bull.
Well,
didn't have the shite hole
exactly. Well, I put out a tweet after Robert De Niro did this. I actually tweeted it at Mr. De Niro. I've never had occasion to meet him, but I said that this basically knocks the Bullwinkle movie out of the top slot for dumbest things ever done by Robert De Niro.
Was he in Bullwinkle?
He was. He played the fearless leader, the guy who, tells Boris and Natasha what to do. So perhaps he should be investigated for a Russian collusion. I
think that's in the whole story all along.
Exactly. But, that was a terrible film and a good example that Robert De Niro is not always knowing what he's doing.
He's not infallible.
Not infallible.
So he's not like the Pope. He's not infallible. So another piece here in National Review is really right up our alley. Jason, you and I have been starting to talk about the degree to which the elite, endowed, not-for-profit educational institutions are actually fleecing students and their parents. And they're all about today fancy life living for the professors, the associate professors, and I think the fees that are charged by these institutions are indefensibly high. The quality of intellectual discourse coming out of these universities is indefensibly low and increasingly monosyllabic. Single approach to life, one size fits all. These are not great American values. When you start, selling propaganda in supposed universities at high cost to young people, you're really doing horrible things. And so
what about the college professors that are going to Antifa rallies and hitting people on the head with bicycle locks?
No, it's ridiculous. That's absurd. If anything, in a university, there should be no if you're going to be intolerant of anything, you should be intolerant of violent protests. Those are
Right.
things that you should not allow on your campus.
Definitely.
And the last thing you want to have is an authority figure, promoting violence. For thinking in a different way. So it would appear that Jared Kushner now has his security clearance, as does Ivanka, and the Trump administration is wasting no time positioning itself to head back out to the Middle East and keep up the big momentum. Saudi Arabia is going hard against Iran, in particular in Yemen, and we're beginning to make progress, I think, in many different places. I sent, but didn't put it up here, that an amazing development. I think it's Muqtada bin Sadr, I think is the guy's name, in Iraq, who used to be a pro-Iran leader and vehemently anti-West leader, is actually now making moves to encourage Iraqi Jews to return to Iraq and to be welcomed, not so he can kill them, so he can welcome them. I mean, that's amazing if that's really true.
Yeah.
So I think by doing things differently but intelligently, Donald Trump and his team so far seem to be making great strides. Now, will they have setbacks? Of course they will. Now I have to. I've mentioned before that to Chelsea Clinton, who clearly did not listen to me. Not that she should, but I mentioned that Chelsea Clinton, she stood up to her parents, renounced their activities, exposed what was going on in the Clinton Foundation. I'd be all in, but she decided not to do that. So I could not resist. Somebody's making fun of her.
Yeah, she's got some on her face.
That she looks like Howdy Doody. And, the vicious things that have been said about Donald Trump's appearance, including Kathy Griffin carrying his bloody, severed head with a knife. When you get into this high-stakes political stuff, Chelsea Clinton cannot have it both ways. She can't go and say, as she did recently, as Donald Trump was wending his way outside the country, that Donald Trump doesn't speak for America, somehow suggesting maybe she speaks and her people speak for America.
Yeah.
You can't go there. You set up that you're going to be this big adult. You're going to take on all comers. You're going to criticize. Well, if satire works both ways, and harsh comments work both ways.
Charles, just real quickly, while you were talking about the Mideast policy and Jared Kushner, I wanted to point out that the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, did show up at a royal event. So rumors of his death were exaggerated or premature or whatever that Mark Twain quote might be.
And he wasn't wearing those weird blue glasses or had some strange exoskeleton thing around him.
Right. No, he was not a Captain Pike head in a box. He appeared to be standing, so he's in better health than Mrs. Clinton.
But he was wearing a scarf, but not an Hermes scarf. So then we have this final bon mot here that I couldn't believe this. I like to end each presentation now on a happy note, but here we have a story. I think this is the correct one, that Janet Napolitano, who we have to remember, she was head of the Department of Homeland Security, and I think now she's a university president, that one of the most famous and wanted deserters for the longest period of time actually has been working on her staff for a long time. How could you not know that?
Charles, there's a lot of people working on a lot of staffs that are sort of going under the radar, unnoticed, that people aren't necessarily aware of. I find it quite strange. Sorry, You had something else to say about that.
No, that's about it. I mean, I could have made a comment about Bill Clinton and the work that was done, but I decided not to.
Well, the thing that I was alluding to there, of course, was the discovery just the other day that Imran Awan is actually working for the defense attorney that's representing him in his mortgage fraud case, and that's the firm of Gowan, Silva, and Winograd. This is Chris Gowan, of course. A lot of people have seen for the past several months, the various conversations that I've had with Chris. And, people have had a lot of comments that I should be nice to him and I'm being unprofessional, trolling him or whatever I'm doing. I mean, that certainly wasn't my intent. I originally contacted Chris because he had released an absurd press release saying that any allegations against Imran Awan were coming from conspiracy theorists who are Islamophobic and part of the Pizzagate media, which was just a cornucopia, as you might say, Charles, a journalistic or literary mulligatawny of shit, for lack of a better description. And so I started to engage with Chris because I had serious questions for him. And, most recently I went to their office because Chris said I had no evidence of any other crimes. And of course I presented one of the partners there at Gowan, Silva, and Winograd. We're going to see in this video here, Jesse Winograd comes to the door. I presented them with the evidence that we found at 4809 Sprayer Street, which indicated that Imran had a high-speed internet account there that seems to have been feeding data to a secretive server, one of the most popular items in 2017 and prior, a secret server that could have been warehousing stolen congressional data. Imran Awan, of course, was barred from the network there in Congress for suspicion of hacking and thousands of unauthorized access, logins to the network there. And of course, if he's logging in, we don't know where he's logging in from. It could have been an automated server locked in the air-conditioned shed there at 4809 Sprayer Street. And very easily that could have been receiving data, top secret data from U.S. Congress that could have included everything from the location of the SEAL Team 6 that was shot down in a Chinook helicopter in Afghanistan. These are questions about extremely serious crimes. And just this morning, Charles, I have emailed Michael Mirando, who of course is the prosecutor in this matter. And what I've done is I have sent Mr. Mirando a link to that Zero Hedge story, hopefully so that something can be done about this. If people go to the Crowdsource the Truth Twitter page, you can see that there. I just had it a moment ago. There's the link. I like using this photograph of Imran Awan working the phones at, it used to be Gowan, Rhodes, Winograd, and Silva, but coincidentally, Charles, Mark Rhodes left the firm at a time that does seem to coincide pretty precisely with the time that Imran Awan became a client. Now, I spoke to Mark Rhodes the other day, and he would not go on record as to confirming or denying that these two events were at all related. But when I checked the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, the Gowan, Rhodes, Winograd, and Silva website became Gowan, Silva, and Winograd in about February, which does coincide quite closely with the time frame in which Imran Awan would have become a client. So I thought Mr. Mirando might find that extremely interesting. And of course, we all remember when the renter of 4809 Sprayer Street, who was Laurel Everly, I drove Laurel to the U.S. Capitol Police with her laptop that had gone missing for 3 days while she was renting 4809 Sprayer from Imran Awan. Imran, as the landlord, would come and go as he pleased. He had the keys and would be there as often as 2 to 3 times per week, maybe checking on a server that could have been in the shed, maybe just to harass Laurel and her daughter. But Laurel's laptop went missing for 3 or more days, and she had no idea where it was. It showed up just sitting on her bed days later and started emailing people that she didn't know it was emailing, and friends of hers alerted her that she seemed to be hacked. So we brought that laptop to the U.S. Capitol Police, submitted it as evidence, and they promptly gave it to Gowan, Silva, and Winograd. Now, Thomas Paine, who's a friend of this show and a former law enforcement officer, said on the broadcast that the only way that could have happened is if someone on the defense team at Gowan, Silva, and Winograd would have intervened with the U.S. Capitol Police. And in the various conversations I've had with Chris Gowan, both on the streets of Washington, D.C. and on the telephone, Chris has acknowledged that he's a regular viewer of Crowdsource the Truth. So I want to encourage Chris and the other regular viewers out there to become sponsors. Monthly sponsorship is always appreciated, even $1 or $5 a month. You can go to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Or you can make a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsource the truth. And I would encourage Chris and the other partners at Gowan, Silva, and Winograd to sponsor the channel so they can keep a regular flow of information about when our evidence is going to the Capitol Police, and they can maybe, if this is what happened, intervene. Now, the real question I have, Charles, is, and I've asked this of Michael Miranda, hopefully he can look into this, how long has Imran worked there? And was he working there when that evidence arrived? Did the law firm intervene? And did the defendant in this case have hands and eyes on the evidence before the prosecutor? What are the implications of all this? There's a plea hearing scheduled for July 3rd, and Chris Gowan keeps rescheduling these hearings, much to my chagrin, because Amtrak has changed their policy, and each time they change the hearing, I'm losing $50. But perhaps that's Chris Gowan's strategy to drain me $50 at a time. What do you think of all that, Charles?
Well, I think the Awan case, which you were early on, is one that cries out both for an investigation, a real investigation, of what the hell was going on, what the hell was happening, with so many members, Democratic members of Congress, signing up this man and members of his family to get positions where they would have had access to, sensitive, maybe even classified information without checking into their backgrounds. I mean, they're trying to defend the lack of closer scrutiny under a theory that they wouldn't do it because they didn't want to be Islamophobic. I mean, that's ridiculous. Are you going to tell me that we really can't attack ISIS because that would be Islamophobic? Come on. I mean, the goal is to protect, when you take, as far as I know, when you put your hand on whatever you want to put your hand on and swear an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, there's not a writer that says you're an idiot and, you can because you're a congressperson. And Debbie Wasserwoman Schultz, I like to call it. In her case, I mean, she was chairman of the Democratic National Committee, wasn't she?
Yes.
And also, a congressperson. I mean, you can't do what she was doing. Sorry.
No, she's definitely someone who needs to be investigated. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there. Whoops, you just went sideways on us, Charles. Perhaps that is an indicator.
That's the hook.
There we go. Well, Charles, is there anything else you wanted to cover today before we sign off for the afternoon?
We're in good shape. The computer gremlins are monkeying with my phone, but we're in good shape.
Happens. Very well.
Thanks
well, thank
so
you. I appreciate it, Charles. Always great to see you, and looking forward to the Father's Day edition of Sunday with Charles on Crowdsource the Truth. I'm not sure if the Crowdsource the Truth live streaming channel will be back up on the 17th or after the 17th, and we've already seen some troll activity trying to incite me into doing various things. I had established an alternate YouTube channel, Charles, for putting up all of the evidence of organized harassment, and the progenitor of that harassment has today submitted multitude of complaints with YouTube that resulted in that channel being terminated. And I found that very interesting because it took me months of complaining about the organized harassment, the false claims, criminal accusations based on no evidence. YouTube did nothing. And in a week of just simply posting that evidence, that's been up for a week and it's already gone. So we'll see what happens there. But Charles, thank you for that presentation today. As I said, the link will be posted just as soon as we're done here, and I will see you soon.
All right, safe travels, and happy birthday to Donald Trump.
Oh, that's right. Is that tomorrow will be Donald Trump's birthday? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for watching, and we will see you soon.